Hey, everyone. I'm your host, James Jackson, and this is ARCast. Join me each episode as we shine the spotlight on a category management or shopper insights professional doing compelling work in the trenches. If you're ready, let's dive right in. I'm here today with Eric Nardulli, and he's former vice president of merchandising at Rite Aid. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, James.
Yeah, so hopefully you've listened before and you kind of get a feel. We're going to do a couple things a little different, but we'll have fun along the way. I do have a question for you before we get started with your career. So I just want to kind of get a feel. What the heck is going on in the drug channel?
Yeah, that's a question I've been asked a lot lately. The way I view it is, quite frankly, there's a ton of opportunity for change, opportunity to kind of start listening to customers in a different way again. I think it's a channel that maybe 10, 15 years ago in my career was like the hottest place to be. Everyone wanted to be there. And there was explosive growth in terms of locations, size of locations, and all that stuff. And I think there's a bit of a hangover right now, which tends to happen in retail as brick and mortar grows very, very quickly, and they kind of try to leverage that momentum. But I think right now there's an opportunity to really listen to what customers want, listen to how they want to be served in this channel, and quite frankly, leverage the fact that there are hundreds of millions of prescriptions out there, and people need to pick them up, and that's just in the U.S. And people need someplace to pick them up and pick them up safely, reliably. And the other piece is, quite frankly, convenience is one of the hottest channels in retail these days. And these locations and the concentration of locations really lend themselves to being a convenience type of place for people to go. So you put those two things together, you figure out the right assortment, the right way to serve customers, and the right way to do right by these communities, and you've got an amazing opportunity. So I think that to me is really what I see when I see the channel. But you also have lots of folks and money flowing in, and people who believe things are a certain way. And the channel really needs folks who are willing to think a little bit differently and take a step back and look at it from a new perspective, and combine that with the incredible legacy knowledge that exists in the businesses.
Got it. No, that makes sense. I mean, I remember, we have a Walgreens down the street from our office, and then all of a sudden they put a CVS like almost in the same parking lot. And I'm like, what is going on? But like you said, at that point, it was hot. So everybody was, putting in new stores and what have you. And yeah, we're definitely in a new day and times. Appreciate that. We'll talk more about that and other things as we get into the trenches. So if you're ready, let's get in the trenches. We have several listeners who want to be where you have been and are. So whether that's a VP level or chief merchant level. And the question I have for you is, when did you know you were chief merchant material?
When I know that, I'll tell you.
There you go.
I think really, for me, the success I've had in my career has kind of happened organically. I've always been interested in retail. I've always been interested in how customers think about the experience. I've always kind of had fun in lots of different retail stores. And, I guess my advice for getting ahead or seeking achievement in category management and retail leadership is, first and foremost, I think it's treat it like it's your own business, your category, your desk, your part of the business, your whatever it is that you're working on. Treat it like your own. If this was your business down the street and you were unlocking the door every day, what would you be doing to optimize and make the most for your family, to keep the roof over your head and to feed your family? Are those the same things you're doing while you're working for a 10, 20, 2,000, 10,000 location chain? To me, they should be some of the same things. Obviously, the scale is different, but when I've seen merchants making decisions that just kind of seem like they're going with the flow, that's what's always happened. And I posed that question: well, if this was James's store, would you be making the same decision? And oftentimes the answer is no. Well, but that's what I'm expected to do here. That's what I'm expected to, that's what the person before me did. That's what my friend in the next office, the next workspace is doing. Uh, do it the way you would do it if it was your business. I think that to me is paramount. I think another important thing is really to maintain an open mind. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about what's happening in the drug business. And I think I've been guilty many times in my career of, you kind of get into your pattern. You've been doing a job for three
Yeah.
months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be. And you get comfortable and you're doing things the same way. And I'd say 9 out of 10 challenged businesses that have gone away, it's because they just kept doing stuff the same way. And as an individual category management leader, you need to keep thinking about what do customers want today? What's next? What are competitors doing that's really interesting? What are folks in other types of businesses or other social strata doing that is just kind of looking at things a different way? You've got to think about that as a category leader. And then I think
Sure.
the final thing, which I think is foundational, is you've got to do everything with authenticity and integrity, whether
Mm.
it's working with your colleagues within your own organization, whether it's talking to suppliers and working with suppliers out there, whether it's talking with customers and responding to them. Um, you know, there's no new tricks. There's no trick that is so opaque that people aren't going to recognize it eventually.
Sure.
You got to do things in a way that has integrity. It doesn't mean you don't make really hard decisions. It doesn't mean that you don't have really tough conversations, but do it with integrity and do it in a really authentic way. And I think, those things are really going to put you on the path to success.
No, I love that. I love that. And as you talk about it, I mean, obviously you didn't just come up with that out of nowhere, or there was a pathway that kind of helped you formulate. I'm assuming some of those thoughts in your approach to the business. If I look at your LinkedIn profile, trying to do my homework and see, well, how did he get there? You're at Vitamin World, you have that chief merchant title, but then underneath it says, merchandising and operational roles, various roles. Um, but what were some of those roles that you had that kind of helped formalize, your thinking, and it gave you the experience necessary to get to that level?
Yeah. So I thought it was funny when you sent me the note that you saw in my resume, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, I had gotten the advice from a colleague a while ago that I've just had the opportunity to do so many things earlier in my career that it made my resume or my LinkedIn just look like crazy. And the majority all of those things really were at NBTY, the Nature's Bounty Company, the former owner of the Vitamin World stores. But I was in college in Maryland. I went to Washington College, first college founded in the new nation. Um,
Oh, wow.
very, very, very proud alumni. Um, as my license plate holder says, you know, I got the opportunity to work in a Vitamin World store. I'd done a couple of retail jobs in health and wellness at other stores, and it was something I was just really passionate about and cared about. Grew up in a household where health and wellness was very important,
Okay.
and very holistically so. I have a dad who is very focused and regimented on exercise and how long it takes and pushing yourself and all
Oh,
those things.
wow.
And then I have a mom who's very focused on things like meditation, Reiki, swimming, and kind of holistic wellness. So the two of
Interesting.
them together kind of just, raised me to think about my wellness kind of as part of my life, not just an afterthought. And so that kind of directed me towards health and wellness businesses. And I wanted a little money to spend while I was in school, and ended up eventually working in a Vitamin World store that had opened by where my apartment was in Maryland, and got the opportunity to start there as a sales associate. And over the course of a few months and some luck, ended up becoming the store manager. So I actually
Mm.
ended up managing a store for my my sophomore, junior, and senior years in college. So
Whoa.
yeah, I balanced, kind of early in the morning classes, evening classes. Generally wore my Vitamin World polo uniform shirt underneath the jacket while I was in class, and then I'd go to the store and I'd do my thing. But um, foundationally, I think it was incredible for my retail merchandising career to really get to be in the stores,
Yeah.
understand. Hey, you get at the time you got a packet. You didn't get them electronically, but you got your planograms for that month or that quarter or
Yeah.
whatever it was. you got your promo and display setup stuff. You had all those things, and you're balancing that with customer service, and you're balancing that with the fact that the lights are broken, and you're balancing that with the fact that there's a huge stain on the carpet that you've got to get addressed, and balancing that with scheduling people, et cetera, et cetera. So it really
Yeah.
gave me some great perspective on um, kind of execution in store and what that means. I got the opportunity to kind of uh, help open lots of stores during that period. Got the opportunity to kind of travel a bit and run different stores and different types of shopping centers and malls and strip centers and outlets
Wow.
and all that kind of stuff. You know, kind of reflect back on that as a really, really, really fun time in my life, not just my career, but in my life. I got to know all these people. I got to meet all these customers. You get to know, folks that are
Yeah.
coming to the store, and you get to be a part of a community. And that to me was just awesome. Finished up school, and got the opportunity to move to Long Island, New York for Vitamin World and become a category manager. And over the course of a number of years, I was a category manager. I was a senior category manager. I was a director of merchandising, and then
Okay.
eventually became the chief merchant. So kind of had the opportunity to kind of that first, let's call it 10 years of my professional career to really kind of spend some time in stores and work with operators, some really, really, really great ones. And then also be a part of kind of fast growth where tons and tons of stores were opening at the time.
Hmm.
Specialty was super hot. Vitamins and wellness weren't
Yes.
really available, and mass and drug and club and everything was, you know, the wellness stores, the wellness chains. And it was just a really fun and exciting time to kind of be doing that work.
No, that's incredible, especially given how young you were to be running a store. That is crazy. So you have these experiences. You mentioned I'm in the store. I'm, in the office, and I asked you at the beginning about, when did you know? But was there a time where somebody said to you, "Hey, you look like you could be on a rocket ship to get to a certain level," or was there a point in time, like you had a project or something like that, that kind of the light bulb went off and said, I could really do something pretty significant in this organization? Did you ever have any kind of situations like that?
Yeah, I'd say it was somewhere around, let's say 20, 2009, 2010, something like that. Um, the Vitamin World stores were a subsidiary of the Nature's Bounty Company and BTY. We were challenged by our CEO to kind of rethink the business. Things were changing. Supplements and wellness products were becoming available in lots of other places. A lot of that being driven by BTY and how they were selling in brands like Nature's Bounty and Sundown and Metrex, et cetera, into all these mass merchants, drug stores, et cetera. And we had to think a little bit differently. So got to spend a lot of time with a number of folks, including our CEO at the time, to really rethink the soup to nuts merchandising for the
Yeah.
stores. Everything from the packaging to the pricing to the brand positioning to the assortment and how we viewed it, and really kind of think about what would be the ideal state for the types of stores we're running, the locations we're running, the website, which at that time was, becoming huge. Um, and, spent probably 6, 12 months rethinking everything and then rethinking it
Mm,
again and then rethinking it again. And we kind of successfully relaunched the brand. It wasn't in trouble, but it needed kind of a little bit of supercharging. We were able to do that. And that kind of gave me the exposure of maybe the total business all at once and thinking about everything all together. And I think that was kind of one of the most exciting, um,
yeah.
challenging, fun, tiring uh, things I've ever done in my career. But it kind of set the stage for me to really look at things holistically. And I think some of the things that I think about taking from that are, kind of connected to one of the earlier questions around what do you do to move your career forward. As a category leader, you've got to think about total store, total brand, and the customer's total shopping experience. Just because
Sure.
you are the category manager for widgets doesn't mean you shouldn't be partnering with the person that's leading sprockets. You've got to,
Yeah.
it's the customer doesn't come in the store and say, oh, well, James's section is over there and he's going to run it like this, and Eric's section is over here. So that really gave me that broader exposure to kind of think about things, holistically. Um, and that kind of maybe ignited a bit of a fire in me that I kind of wanted to do more and think more broadly and
Mm.
think more strategically for, a total retail company.
Got it. Got it. So, I mean, that's super exciting. Like you said, to have that opportunity to be in the midst of all of that, and it sounds like, hey, you're doing great. You're chief merchant at Vitamin World, but I look at your profile, and then all of a sudden I move over to Nature's Bounty, which at the time, I understand that was the owner of Vitamin World, but it looked like you went from being in a retailer to being in a manufacturer, that you went from being more merchandising to product development. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the passions I had when I was leading merchandising at Vitamin World, and the time leading up to that, was product innovation and being on trend. And it was such an important part of what Vitamin World was doing at the time, what all the wellness retailers are doing at the time. You kind of had to be at the cutting edge of things. You had to be the place where consumers heard about product X on Oprah, Dr. Oz, when they were still on the air, when
Yeah,
and their neighbor mentioned it, whatever, and you kind of had to be ahead of that. And I was really engaged in kind of the private label aspect of the business, which was 70-80% of the business those stores back then. And um, that innovation within the Vitamin World stores was actually feeding innovation for the nationally sold brands. And, it was something like 10% of the innovation we did ended up trickling into those other brands. And that's how they kind of served the retailers out in the market, and had some real success, and some doubles and triples and home runs doing that. And so there was an opportunity that was put in front of me, to come and kind of move over to the other side, and
sure.
to start working on product development, branding, marketing, those type of things more broadly across the total product portfolio. And I thought it was a really cool opportunity to kind of lean in
Yeah.
on one of the things that was one of my favorite parts of the job,
Okay.
and also to kind of in a kind of deeper way help create the future for um, and all these different kind of top tier wellness
Yeah.
brands.
Yeah. Yeah. So you make that move. I mean, there's some difference there, right? Because, I'm pulling the lever at a retailer. I'm, able to execute at the stores. And so can you talk a little bit about, what you endured or what you experienced from a change perspective? What was something that you expected maybe and ended up being completely different? Just kind of interested to see how that transition took place for you.
Yeah, I think as a merchant, you definitely are always selling. You're selling to leadership. You're selling to the operators. You're selling to your colleagues throughout the organization. But when I moved over to the product development innovation side, you really had to sell it in a different way, because you're not the decision maker. So you're approaching brand XYZ or the folks leading the retail business, whatever, and you say, hey, this is the next big thing. Okay, well, why? Why do I need to spend money on that product? Why do I
Yeah,
need, you know, uh, make room for it on shelf? Why do I need to move the machine of retail to change planograms and get it on shelf and put it into slot it in the warehouse, do all that stuff? Why? And you kind of I had to learn how to pitch that, whereas I was formerly in a position where I made the decision, and obviously again you have to kind of sell that and justify it and make your number, but um, you're not as directly connected to the number anymore. So you kind of have to articulate to the folks making the decisions for the brands, this is how you're going to be able to hit those growth numbers that you're being charged with. This is how you're going to beat your competitor. This is how
sure.
you're going to have something on shelf that's better than the guy down the street. So you kind of, for me, that was kind of different, because you couldn't just say, hey, this is my decision, I'm going to do it. It was, you were influencing someone else's decision, and so that was really different.
Yeah, that would be it. And I look, you said, hey, I love product development. There were a lot of things going on, but you had, it looks like over 200 different products that you produced or created in a 4-year period. So that's a lot. I mean, that's crazy. Can you talk about what does it take to launch a product, a successful product?
Yeah. It really comes down to understanding what the consumer is looking for, in terms of what's on trend. And that doesn't just mean the product. It's about the features. It's about how it's presented. It's about how it fits with the brand. You kind of have to consider all of those things. And you also have to have folks on your team that you're working with that really are in lockstep with you, that understand that in a similar way to you. Um, and also that then understand that in a similar way to the folks leading the category or the marketing team or the sales team or whatever the case may be. Um, and you really want to also make sure, whether it's the sales team that's selling into the trade or the marketing team that's articulating that to buyers, or whether it's you're working internally at a retailer, that there's an articulation of that vision for the product or that new brand or that new line or that new type of delivery or whatever the case may be, that they really get it. Because all along that chain of people, everyone needs to understand what's happening. And at any given link in that chain, if there's a break, the product's not going to be successful. And so you want to really, kind of be approaching these folks hat in hand saying, hey, listen, here's what we're thinking. Are you bought in? What questions do you have? And how can we answer them? Do you have suggestions on how to make this better or for it to align more closely with what your
Sure.
vision is for the brand that you own the P&L for? And, and then also you really need to, when you're a product developer, understand your manufacturing network, whether that's you're vertically integrated and it's your manufacturing, whether you're partnering with a third party. What are they capable of? What are their unique things that they can do? And how do you kind of make that an interesting part of the product you're developing? I think, uh, kind of walking manufacturing facilities, talking to the engineers or the
Yeah.
or the you know the quality folks, getting their feedback, and the things that they think are kind of cool or interesting that the equipment, the machinery, the facility can do. How do you kind of combine that with what people are looking for and propel forward kind of the innovation that you're looking to put in front of consumers?
Got it. Got it. So yeah, I mean, you've spent your entire career or most of your career within the MBTY umbrella. You've done retail, then you do the product development, and then it looks like you move. So you go to Giant Eagle.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking of like, wow, that had to be different. All of a sudden, I'm at a new business, got to meet new people, understand the culture, and then also I'm charged with, and this looks like it happened multiple times. I'm charged with either modernizing a business or kind of propping up an underdeveloped business. Can you talk about that whole experience? How did you kind of ramp up? And what were things that you had to do in order to create success in your different roles?
Yeah. So, I had the good fortune of being approached with the opportunity at Giant Eagle to lead their health, beauty, and wellness business. And I thought it was a really interesting challenge because, here's a really great grocery retailer, regional grocery retailer in the middle of the country that really believed in health, beauty, and wellness as a differentiator for their business, and believed that there was an opportunity to further integrate it into kind of their holistic shop and their holistic experience in stores. They're also operating really fantastic pharmacies out of those stores. How do you connect all of those things? And they had spent some years um, doing some really special, incredible, fun stuff in the health, beauty, and wellness part of the store. And they had lost a little momentum, let's say. And so, me as a person, as I kind of, let's call that, moving into the next stage of my career, I started to realize that I love kind of problem solving, and I love
Mm,
kind of understanding what the challenge is, what's the new vision, what is the new strategy, and how can I kind of identify the business issue and opportunity and kind of move things and forward in the right direction, and how can I um, supercharge, build, inspire a team to do that with me. And I saw a really great opportunity in a part of the country that I always liked and I've grown to love. I'm sitting in Pittsburgh. I
yep.
moved for that. And so, and then I think the other thing that really is important is, spent some time with a lot of the leaders there and really, really, really liked the people. I
Okay.
liked the
That
folks
helps.
yeah, you know, and maybe it was a bit of a shock to the system because I had been in New York. I had been, on Long Island.
Yeah.
Culturally, it's very different here in Pittsburgh. And so I also kind of took note of that and really kind of liked that difference, that juxtaposition, and wanted to experience that a bit.
Mm,
That time I'd been living on Long Island for 10 or 11 years, and it was by far the longest I had ever lived anywhere. Um, you know, this address I live at now is my 14th address in my life, so I've moved a lot,
good Lord.
and I saw this opportunity that I saw a great professional opportunity. I saw the
Yeah.
opportunity to live someplace different that sounded interesting. I saw some people that I thought were awesome, and most importantly, really interesting business to get involved in. And grocery is one of those stores, those channels that I love to shop. I love to walk around and look at things and touch and smell and observe and watch how people shop. And it's obviously an essential channel of business for most
Absolutely.
households in the world. Um, so wanted to be a part of that and saw a
Mm,
great opportunity and saw an organization that was uh, willing to put the faith in someone to kind of take the reins and get after it. And that's what I did. I joined that team and we did that and had tons and tons of fun doing it and learned a lot. I think one of the really interesting things was I spent 15 years in total at Nature's Bounty Vitamin World, and I think you kind of think you know a lot, and then you go somewhere else and you realize there's a lot you don't know.
there's a lot. Yeah.
Um, really, you know, enjoyed that kind of change and that exposure to something that was very different, and also enjoyed the kind of I don't know if you want to call it underdog status. Giant Eagle's a food company; it's a grocer,
Hmm.
and health, beauty, and wellness was for them more importantly. I think it is at a lot of grocers, but it's certainly not the core business. Um, that kind of almost gave a little cover where I was able to do some fun and different things because you're not really the primary focus. And
Sure.
that freedom and that ability to experiment and having come from kind of an entrepreneurial organization at the Nature's Bounty Company, really allowed me to do some kind of impactful things with the team
Hmm.
and have some fun. And then the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I started looking at the numbers. So when you first started there, you had a business of about 400 million. Then it says you added another 750 million because you added front end to your responsibilities. Then your final role, you add like another $2 or $3 billion worth of business. So my question for you is, and I've never done that. So I'm interested in understanding what is the difference between running a $400 million business and then stacking all the way to, let's call it a $4 billion business. It seems like maybe it's just scale, but are there fundamental things that really change or how you approach the business when it gets larger and larger? Like,
Yeah, I was thinking about that kind of question before we got together today. And I think, a lot of people will say, oh, it's just another zero or three
yeah.
zeros, whatever. But the way I really think about it is it's driving a go kart versus driving an 18 wheeler. Yes, in
Okay.
theory, you're going, you press the gas pedal, you turn the steering wheel, you go in a straight line and around the corner, and you try not to hit too many things.
Yeah.
But it becomes more involved when you're driving the 18 wheeler, when the businesses get bigger and bigger. And I think the thing that I really learned during that period, which I also learned during the period I did product development at Nature's Bounty, is that no person's an island. You can't do stuff by yourself. So you've got to have a team around you that is invested, is engaged, is communicative, and understands the standards, the vision. Um, that because as you touch all these different businesses and you have all this scale and all these products and all these suppliers and all these stores and all these other responsibilities, you need to lean on other folks, and quite frankly, you also need to keep learning and maybe even learn at a greater pace. And the teams around you are the ones that are going to teach you at that point.
Hmm.
And so I think it's about leaning in with folks around you that have integrity, authenticity, creativity,
Got it.
have an understanding of the different types of businesses that you're going to be working with. You have at a mass merchant, you have a merchant that's coming up and they start in electronics.
Hmm.
Eventually, one day they become the chief merchant. There's a bajillion categories there. They're not going to know everything about everything, but they're going to have experts and folks that are going to teach them things and everything else, and help support them and drive the business forward. So, you know, helping to put those folks in positions of authority and decision making, and then listening and backing them up is really how you kind of um, manage that, and being working really hard at communication and listening.
Yeah.
Communication is 2/3 listening and 1/3, you know,
Yeah.
talking or
Yeah.
saying, writing emails, text, whatever you're going to do. Uh, you know, hearing what people are saying, hearing what the customers are saying, hearing what the teams are saying, and then, figuring out where the gems are there, recognizing folks, lifting them up and setting examples for the folks over in this part of the business and this part of the business and this part of the business to me has been absolutely essential.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you're talking, a couple things come to mind that you've said over and over again. One is having fun, but another thing that you talk a lot about is the people and listening, which I think is really interesting because you may not hear that a lot from leaders. It's about, hey, I had this great idea. You did talk about vision, but it was vision and how the people kind of relate to the vision and how they buy into the vision. But just interesting that you focused in on specifically the fact that no one man is an island, and you get into that larger business, you don't know everything. And I think I've seen where leaders come in, and even though they haven't been in the business, they still act like they know everything, and they end up in trouble by doing that. So I love to hear that. You're having a great career. I now understand the whole health and wellness, and your background with your family and kind of coming up through the business, which then begs the question, what happened over at Rite Aid? So you went over to Rite Aid. Would be interested in understanding why you chose that path, or that change, and then kind of what happened while you were there.
Yeah. So, got approached by Rite Aid and I saw a really interesting opportunity. I saw a business, a company, a channel that's ripe for change, opportunity. We talked about that earlier. And, it's not often you get to kind of completely rethink a business with thousands of doors. Um, and, they at the time were really interested in putting the business on a better path. And they were, it was pretty clear that there was going to be some change, some sort of, ownership change, some sort of, reorganization, something. And, they were evaluating kind of every option, and they were trying to build a team of folks to help them, whatever that looked like, to kind of move into the next stage. And it was also a channel I hadn't worked in. I hadn't really worked in drug. I'd done some product development for drug specific, drug channel specific stuff, but it was a channel that was a little bit more of a mystery to me than maybe some of the others. And I saw, an opportunity to do that. And then again, some of the folks I met, I really liked, and I thought I could learn from, and I could have some fun with. And so decided to take that plunge and take that risk. I went into it eyes wide open, but I had also had a, to that point, very fortunate career, very successful career, and wanted to take a little risk, and kind of maybe put my money where my mouth was. I always tell
Mm-hmm.
folks that I work with to take a risk, believe in yourself. And so I wanted to do that. And that's what I did. And, you know, learned a lot, had again, tons of fun, got to be creative, got to also work in an environment for the first time that was capital constrained. To that point in my career, I had worked at companies that were maybe even overcapitalized,
Okay.
really having to understand the financial impact of every penny
Mm-hmm.
we're going to spend. And the fact that there wasn't just this, uh, waterfall of money. It was, okay, well, if you're going to do this, then you can't do this. And maybe you can't do these three things to do this one thing.
Mm.
How do you prioritize? And then also really, really, really interesting and challenging is how do you keep teams motivated as you're going through these really challenging times? And, it's, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier or different when comps are great. You're growing, you're
Yeah.
opening stores and,
Yep.
it's, uh, we're being challenged to do 12% comps instead of 10 and a half. I mean, that's, a different conversation. Hey, listen, we're trying to get this thing through really troubled times. Here's what we're going to be doing. Let's figure out how we're going to make the best of this and let's keep our heads up. It was, a very, very interesting, challenging time where, I mean, everyone says they learn a lot during bankruptcy and everyone says that, it's one of the most interesting times of their career. It's certainly true. I learned more in the couple years I did that work at Rite Aid than maybe any other couple year period in my
Mm.
entire life. It was very interesting.
Wow. All right. So, for anybody listening, they probably know, and you kind of mentioned it, what's happening at Rite Aid. So what's the future for Eric? What are you looking to do now that, you're kind of in a transition period?
Yeah. For me, I think well, I don't think, I believe the next thing is going to be finding a brand or a retailer where I can really help. I can help chart the future. I can chart a new strategy. I can supercharge or reinvigorate a team. I can kind of put to work some of these skills I've learned over the last many years of retail merchandising and working with operators and working in different channels and um, really kind of help folks on either side of the table understand what's happening on the opposite side. I've had a lot of conversations recently around strategy on either the retailer side or the brand side, and it's funny how um, both sides seem to not really understand what the other side needs, wants.
100%. Yeah.
And, some of those questions and conversations are very complex, but some of them really aren't.
Mm.
And putting my background and skills to work where I can kind of help an organization understand that, I think is the future for me. And then you mentioned it earlier, you got to have fun. I want to have fun. You know, I think life's short, and we spend so much time with our colleagues and working and hopefully producing something special. But I think you got to have fun doing it. And to me, these are the funnest jobs in the world. I mean, I do this intentionally. I've done this intentionally. There's nothing more fun than going into a store and saying, I had a hand in getting it on the shelf,
Yeah.
seeing a promotion, that product's flying
Yeah.
off the shelf. I helped create that. Having a family member say, hey, don't you work for store XYZ? I was in one of those stores the other day and bought all this stuff and it was so cool. And I saw this new item. And then you realize, oh, well, I played a part in
It's
that.
you.
That to me
Yeah.
is so, so, so fun. And I think, one of the things I'd recommend that category management professionals do is listen to your friends and family when they ask
Mm.
you, well, tell me what you do. Explain
Yeah.
to me what happens. They're not saying that because it's not fun or interesting. Everyone wants to know how we make happen what we make happen.
Mm.
And that should really be a signal to you. Hey, this is a really interesting, fun thing to be doing with your life and career, and lean into that fun. And by the way, when you're having fun and getting creative, that comes through on shelf or
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the screen when it's on the website. When people are miserable and being hit with a wet noodle, you can feel it and see it in the merchandising strategy. You can tell
Yeah.
when you walk a store, you look at a website, people aren't happy. They're not having fun doing this, they're grinding it out. And you can also tell when they're really inspired, they understand the category, they're having fun, they're being experimental, they're being creative, they're pushing things forward. You can feel that. And that's one of the things that kind of sometimes is hard to put a point on in a
Sure.
deck or with a
Sure.
spreadsheet or whatever else, but it's very meaningful. And I think if you look at some of the hottest brands, companies out there, it's that kind of magic that comes through
Yes.
that's kind of hard to pinpoint.
Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. That is very, very true. Well, you've been talking for a while, but I have a few more questions, but we're going to do kind of a rapid fire lightning round whatever you want to call it. But I think this will be interesting. So if you're ready, I have 4 questions for you. So number one, and you might have mentioned it before, what's a project that you treasure or are most proud of in your career?
So yeah, I did mention that kind of re-merchandising of the Vitamin World stores about 15 years ago. That was really, really interesting to me and really fun. I think also just kind of how we thought through and optimized all the different businesses I had the opportunity to work on at Giant Eagle and we had success with. I think those were really interesting. The opportunity to take established businesses and kind of tune them up and redeploy them is real.
Okay. All right. So at Nature's Bounty, I mentioned you produced a number of different products and you said, hey, I had some doubles, some triples, some home runs. Can you talk about a home run that you had?
I that's interesting. So I think there's a few that I really think a lot about. We had been working a lot on sports nutrition, active nutrition for the Vitamin World stores. It was an area that was a bit underdeveloped for them. And at the time, pre-workout products were really hot. We came up with this great product, but it was as much about the brand, and we called it the Haymaker.
Okay.
I mean, that was just, a huge success. And it was really an interesting thing for me because so much, the product was great formula, all that stuff at work, but name, people just loved the name Haymaker. It was like, get hit with the Haymaker, go work out, and you're going to have an awesome workout. I think
Nice.
another one I think about is, uh, we were working with a third party manufacturer at some really interesting multi-layer technology for tablets. So you could have, different release profiles for the different layers in there. And to this day, one of the products that Nature's Bounty is selling is actually their sustained release melatonin. So you have some of the melatonin comes out immediately, so you can
Mm.
kind of fall asleep, and then a time release layer that kind of releases throughout the evening to keep you asleep. And I still see that on shelf. It's still in their TV commercials. And that was something that, the team that I was working with and I went to the manufacturer. They pitched us the technology. They, we said, well, melatonin and sleep is getting really hot at the time. How can we combine those things? And we did that. And it's a product that's still really successful out there that you even see now other brands knocking it off. So those are kind of two that come to mind.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Quick one on this. So, category manager, I always say, and we always say you manage the 4 Ps. What's your favorite P?
Product.
Okay. I thought you would say that. Yeah.
and I think it was always like Christmas when you're sitting at your desk and suppliers send you all those samples. I remember when I first finished college, moved to New York to work in the office. These boxes are coming with stuff, and I'm like, look at this product, look at this. This is cool. Look at this, and I get to smell this and try this and taste this and touch this and see how it works. And just that excitement. It was always like Christmas. You'd open these boxes and you never knew what was going to be in there. And so yeah, the product, the assortment stuff is just so much fun.
Awesome. Last one for you. So you say you don't do anything alone. We don't do anything alone. As you've gone through your career, is there someone who mentored you or maybe influenced you along the way?
Yeah, I actually have been fortunate enough to have several people who have kind of influenced me, mentored me, taught me. I think first and foremost, I think my parents. I have a dad who pretty much every person who's ever worked with him has pulled me aside and told me, your dad is the smartest person I've ever met in my life. And, he came to the States as a teenager, not speaking English, from Italy, and, ended up, going to Ivy League schools, working for the Coca-Cola company and having a spectacular career. And he taught me the value of hard work, the absolute lack of value in excuses, and integrity. I also credit my mom, who kind of is a very different person than my dad, who reminds me to have a good time, reminds me to think about things differently, reminds me about the people. It's not just the spreadsheets and the numbers, it's the people. And then, I think two folks that I really am grateful for my time at Nature's Bounty are Jeff Schneider and Bill Doherty. I think, Jeff Schneider was the head of the consumer divisions, and Bill Doherty was the head of the Vitamin World stores for a long time. And then he also spent some time working with me in product development. But those two guys cut me a lot of slack, gave me lots of opportunity, forgave me for things, I asked Bill a few years ago. I was like, Bill, I made so many stupid decisions and said so many stupid things and did so many stupid things.
Uh-huh.
Why did you tolerate that? And he's like, and I remember he told me, because you cared, you were working hard, and you were young and stupid. So, it happens, and it's just part of the understanding. And actually, that opened up my mind that, as a leader, you have to, if people are making mistakes, that's good because they're trying, they're pushing, they care. The ones who are quiet and you don't see any mistakes, you don't really hear anything, but, maybe they're not pushing themselves hard enough. But, and then Jeff really, taught me a lot about caring about people again in the workplace, seeing in people, um, talent and things that maybe they're not even aware of themselves. I think, and also the fun thing too, both Bill and Jeff, they were always laughing. I always hear Bill's crazy laugh. Anyone that knows Bill Doherty knows that laugh. And when I think of Jeff, I think of him smiling in meetings. And when you think about someone as accomplished as he was, that's always
Wow.
smiling in meetings, isn't all stressed out and upset
Yeah.
about everything.
Yeah.
Those things to me were really inspiring. And I think about those things all the time.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's it. You've been in the trenches for a while, but if you're ready now, you can take a breath. If you need something to drink real quick, and let's come up for air. Finally, coming up for air. Just a little bit about you personally. Would love to hear understand you live in Pittsburgh and traveled a lot, but maybe talk a little bit about family, what you like, things like that.
Yeah. Maybe one of the things that I missed when you talked about, mentors or really inspiration. I have a awesome wife, Dr. Kate, who runs a wellness practice
Mm-hmm.
0.6 miles up the street here. She's a chiropractor by education, but she's also a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. She has all sorts of other health services at her practice. And she has taught me so much about entrepreneurial spirit, making things happen, being an army of one, leveraging the community and the people around you to kind of deploy that vision. And also, it's just been an incredible partner, sounding board, friend, and anything and everything and more you could imagine in a partner. My wife has been there and has done that, and I'm so fortunate to have met her when I moved here to Pittsburgh 10
Yeah.
years. Um, we've got 3 dogs who we absolutely love. Uh, you know, they are a part of our lives in every way, shape, and form. I do some work with the American Cancer Society right now. I'm in the middle of a 30 miles of dog walking in the month of June to raise money for cancer.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
And,
cool.
so they're a part of that. They're a part of my wife's practice. In general, if I'm not on a podcast, they're usually sleeping at my feet. But I don't want to risk having the Amazon guy ring the bell and have them freak out. They're a huge part of it. And then uh, really am grateful for the family that I come from. Like I mentioned earlier, my dad's an immigrant. I've had the opportunity to travel a lot internationally and visit lots of places and have different perspectives on things, and to really have that first generation American experience, which has been invaluable. And they've exposed me to all different kinds of people from all different walks of life who think differently, and reminded me over and over and over again that people thinking differently is actually a good thing. And it helps you be better and more well-rounded and more creative and more passionate about what you're doing, and helps remove fear from your life and your professional behavior. Yeah. So those that's kind of my family and the folks around me that I'm super, super grateful for.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Eric, this has been a pleasure to talk to you. Learned a ton. Thank you for walking us not only through your career, but some of the key elements of, what it takes to be a chief merchant, what it takes to build businesses and right size them. And I think it was just fascinating, some of the stops that you had along the way and what you learned. So appreciate you being on the show.
James, thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, and I think the podcast is awesome. And
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Awesome. Awesome. So you've just listened to another amazing episode of ARCast. Please look forward to more interesting people like Eric in the weeks to come. And also, please don't forget to share ARCast with your colleagues. So for feedback, topic suggestions, or if you want to be on the show, please go to www.catman.global/ARCast. All I need for you to do is scroll down to the bottom, There's a submission form there. It comes directly to me, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Today's episode was recorded at Studio Xerxes in Minnesota. Our theme music was brought to you by Bryant Lowry, and also special thanks to my friends at the Association of Retail and Consumer Professionals for their promotion and management. So that's it for today. I'm James Jackson signing off, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye.